China lost its Yangtze River dolphin. Climate change is coming for other species next. CNN. They called it the goddess of the Yangtze, the creature so rare that it was believed to bring fortune and protection to local fishermen and all those lucky enough to spot it. But overfishing and human activity drove it to the brink of extinction, and it hasn't been seen in decades. The Baizi or Yangtze River dolphin was this unique and beautiful creature. There was nothing quite like it, said Samuel Turby, a British geologist and conservationist who spent more than 2 decades in China trying to track the animal down. It was around for tens of millions of years and was in its own mammal family. There are other river dolphins in the world, but this one was very different, so unrelated to anything else. Turby said. Each myth was more than just another species tragedy. It was a huge loss of river diversity in terms of how unique it was and left huge holes in the ecosystem. Experts have expressed grave concern that other rare native young animal and plant species are likely to suffer a similar fate to the Veige river dolphin as worsening climate change and extreme weather conditions take their toll on Asia's longest river. China has been grappling with its worst heat wave on record, and the Yangtze, the third longest river in the world, is drying up. With rainfall below average since July, its water levels have plunged to record lows of 50% of their normal levels for this time of year, exposing cracked riverbeds and even revealing submerged island. Parts of the Yangtze River have dried up from the extreme heat. The drought has already had a devastating effect on China's most important river, which stretches an estimated 6,300 kilometers, 3,900 miles from the Tibetan Plateau to the East China Sea near Shanghai and provides the water, food, transport, and hydroelectric power to more than 400 million people. The human impact has been enormous. Factories were shut to preserve electricity, and the water supplies for tens of thousands of people have been affected. Less talked about, experts say, is the environmental impact that climate change and associated extreme weather events have had on the hundreds of protected and threatened wildlife and plant, plant species living in and around the river. The Yangtze is one of the world's most ecological critical rivers for biodiversity and the freshwater ecosystem, and we're still discovering new species yearly, said conservation ecologist Hua Fang Yuan, an assistant professor from Peking University. Many of the little known and unknown fish and other aquatic species are most likely facing extinction risk silently, and we simply do not know enough. The Chinese alligator at the zoo in Shanghai, native to the Yangtze, their numbers in the wild are drastically declining and could worsen as the river shrinks and dries up. Hundreds of species at risk. Over the years, conservationists and scientists have identified and documented hundreds of wild animal and plant species native to the Yangtze. Among them are the Yangtze finless, porpoise, which similar to the bison, faces extinction due to human activity and habitat loss, and critically endangered reptiles like the Chinese alligator and the Yangtze giant soft-shell turtle, believed to be the largest living species of freshwater turtle in the world. Experts have also noticed the drastic decline of many native freshwater species of fish, like the now extinct Chinese paddlefish and the stongun. A high risk is the Chinese giant salamander, one of the largest amphibians in the world. While the populations have crashed, Turby, the zoologist, said, and the species is now on the verge of extinction. Although they are protected species, Chinese giant salamander are under greater threat from climate change. Increasing global temperatures and drought will definitely do it no good when it is already extremely vulnerable, Turby said. The Chinese giant salamander pictured at the local breeding facility. They have for a long time faced threats like poaching, habitat loss, and pollution, but when you add climate change into the mix, their chances of survival become drastically thin. He added, they can only live within freshwater environment, and lower water levels would inevitably place the greater pressure on their numbers across China. A problem for the world. The nature conservation groups like the World Wildlife Fund say the Yangtze plight is the major concern not only for the Chinese people and government, but also for the wider international community. Rivers around the world, from Europe to the United States, have declined to historically low flow levels that are negatively impacting ecosystems, said its lead scientist Jeff Opperman. Reduced river flow and warmer waters in the Yangtze are the threat to freshwater species and increase pressure on already critically endangered animals like the remaining Yangtze pinless porpoise and the Chinese alligators left in the wild. Lower river levels also impact the health of nearby lakes and wetlands, which are vital to millions of migratory birds along the East Asian flyway. Yangtze giant soft-shell turtle at the zoo in Jiangsu province. The species and other turtles are considered seriously threatened. Hua, the conservation ecologist, said more public awareness and greater effort were needed to help China's shrinking Great River. Humans depend on nature for survival. Period. This is the lesson for any civilization, she said. The Yangtze is the longest river in China and all of Asia and has long been a cradle of civilization. Despite the severe conservation threat and losses over the years, there is still much biodiversity to conserve in and along the Yangtze. The now extinct Chinese stongun. This one was released into the Yangtze River back in 2015. Few would deny the importance and the symbolism of the Yangtze, but experts say unless action is taken and soon, more species will follow the fate of the beige and the Chinese paddlefish. Turby, the British geologist, warned against the sort of the complacent that allows the beige to disappear. The Yangtze was the jewel in Asia's crown. There is still so much biodiversity to fight for, and we must not give up hope for saving species like giant salamanders, river reptiles, and others, Turby said. If there's anything we can learn from the death of the Yangtze River dolphin, each that extinction is forever, and we can't afford to take it lightly.